Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core and the Core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. I just have two things on my list today, and the number one title is Joe doing teaser on the beer barrel. It's a shot that's been around but not a lot, and it's on social media. I saw it go by. A teacher of mine, a friend of mine, I guess I would put it that way, posted it, and I pointed out something about why it's so important. A long time ago, when I was a new teacher, part of that journey took me into core new tension that my trademark points to. And I was challenged about a metatarsal endpoint of tension rather than pointed foot and flexed toes, because that's the way Joe says it in his book. See if I can find that for you. Joe's book, Teaser, the Teaser 156. Here. Toes pointed forward and downward is Joe's instructions in his book, Return to Life Through Contrology. And yet, I had evolved my understanding of Pilates to know that the core is a grip at the hips and that there's other rotational dynamics that the body's capable of, and one of them is at the metatarsals. And so I was teaching an endpoint at the metatarsals and challenged by the classicists and my teachers who were religiously devoted to the classical work as they understood it and as it says in Joe's book. But the picture of Joe, it's 4 pictures of Joe in different poses, and one, he's sitting on a big barrel, an end of a beer barrel, not a Pilates barrel, but a real barrel, and he's in teaser, and in that teaser his arms and legs are parallel, and his metatarsals are engaged as an endpoint. It's not pointed foot, flexed toes. It's a press through the balls of the feet by Joe himself. And if you look at the picture, you can see that Joe isn't in the beginning of his career. It seems like his white hair, he's much older in that picture than he would have been when he wrote his book. And so what I'm pointing out to you is that I got to core new tension and was teaching endpoint at metatarsals. And before I even saw Joe's picture doing teaser on the end of a barrel, there's a picture of Joe teaching a student the hanging down on the Cadillac. And she's in demi-point as well. Front snap kick, but a pointed foot with flexed toes. And there was some proof where Joe's standing in front of a student he's teaching who's in a demi-point. And then years later, when that picture of Joe surfaced, sitting on the barrel, there is the master of the method himself demonstrating teaser and having an endpoint of tension at his metatarsals. So there's a whole realm of Pilates that's taught based on archives in the attic, relics really, in the attic, and that the authority is somehow in the relics, and what you can't devise from the relics, you have to take from word of mouth from someone that knew him. And the quote by Tommy Lee Jones in Under Siege about the the unalterability of the dilution of the gene pool, right? If we have to rely on a heritage of tradition and passing down by word of mouth, then the unalterable dilution of the gene pool will inevitably cause dilution of the method. Maybe that's a faux argument, but my point to you is that when you understand what it takes to develop the body uniformly, then any of the artifacts in the attic and any of the people that knew Joe or had an affair with Joe or worked with Joe every day for 10 years or has an unfinished manuscript of Joe's or any of that stuff, my contribution to humanity is identifying core nutension in the human being and the ideal within Joe's method. So core nutension is what we're talking about here, and that Joe engages in core nutention and doing the teaser. And if you're dealing with someone that only cares about artifacts in the attic or relics or pictures of Joe or film of Joe, and that's the only authority, well, right there, I've seen a picture of Joe teaching a woman hanging down in the Cadillac in a flat back with demi-pointe in her feet. That was some years after I was teaching what I believed in based on my understanding and sensation of core nutension. But there's Joe teaching a student, and they're in endpoint at metatarsals. And then years later, there comes this picture, this collage of pictures of Joe, one of which he's sitting on an end of a beer barrel doing teaser, and he's engaged in an endpoint of tension at the metatarsals. So my number 2 title, really, just an extension of what I'm saying from number 1, is know what it takes to develop a body uniformly. If Contrology develops the body uniformly, and you want to teach Pilates, then you want to know how to develop the body uniformly. Meaning you want to know how to create a whole body effort so that the body is developing uniformly. And so what it takes to develop the body uniformly is an application or an engagement of core nutension. That's my opinion and it's my point of view. And you can disagree with it and have your own point of view. That's what life and humanity is all about. But life and humanity, first of all, life is what it is and knows an end to it where there's no longer life. That's where life can't live forever comes from in my ending of the broadcast. And life, even though a life can't end, the world and reality doesn't change because a human being dies. I mean, it may on some ethereal level, and I'm with you on all of that, and yet reality as we know it continues on through hundreds of millions of human beings coming and going. So the physics in which life occurs is much more constant than the temporality of life itself. And it's in that physics that things like rotation and parallel lines and circles, smooth curves, all of the ideals that we explore in our math and our physics to understand the nature of our existence. You can be as whimsical and subjective and be as self-centered in what you teach just based on your point of view of things, like we all do in a way. But when you look at Joe's choreography, you see order and structure that meaning can be taken from. And that's reality that we're talking about. That's loading. That's progressive pattern. And the means to uniform engagement is core new tension. And to me, that's just a fact of life. And it's a fact of life that that most of the current culture in 2019 is oblivious to or unaware of. And those that are even seen it go by think Cornu is a nice, pretty image or something, but don't recognize the physics that it points to. Oppositional rotation between axes in the body. The body engages itself that way in order to move through space. It engages itself that way, period, really. And then the reason I attribute is that it makes you lighter in space, right? It makes, and it'll be up for the biomechanics specialists, the biophysics of body, and the mathematicians and the biologists to lend more credibility to a reality that I'm merely pointing to, that I'm identifying. And that I'm hopefully identifying it for you so that you're aware of it like nobody's business, and you can reference that picture of Joe sitting on the barrel as proof that he moved past locked knees and pointed toes, pointed feet with curved toes. How did he say it? It's easier at 156. He talks about toes pointed forward and downward, knees locked. I mean, this is fine at one point of being able to control the effort, but once you really get a handle on core new tension and are willing to accept, if not the reasoning in your own head, then the sensation in your own body, because both are there for you to accept and make sense of and use as an instructor. There's a real estate company that talks about being this kind of a real estate agent and being above the crowd. Above the crowd. Because you know what you know as an instructor. You can't help but be above the crowd because the crowd either is unaware of core new tension or dismissive of its significance, let alone an understanding of Pilates as being uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. So know what you know. You know, I can only be so emphatic so many times to help you see what others refuse to or ignore or overlook. In the year 4040, core new tension will be well researched and well documented and just understood as the way the body engages itself to move through space. And maybe by then, because core nutension has such, to me, validity and legitimacy across humanity, it's the way human beings have evolved to be able to move through space, that the legitimacy of the biomechanics of that might lend more credibility to one view out of 10,000, thousand of Pilates that is unique in that it sees Pilates as having an ideal within Joe's original work that can be arrived at by just Joe's definition, Joe's promise, and Joe's sequence. All the detail and all the stuff that shows up as exercises and contraindications and modifications for any kind of condition you can think of, all flows out of the ideal set by Joe. Thank you for listening. Thank you for considering this point of view. When you find it sensationally in your own experience, that'll take you from knowing about it to believing in it, because you can feel it. And enjoy that while you can, because life can't live forever. Read between the lines and see behind the curtain and add two and two. Direct your thinking. I forgot about appreciate perspective. Geist